Okay. Welcome, everybody. Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the Abridged Code of Jewish Law, Chapter 50. We're up to number 10. We're discussing the laws on of blessings. So we discussed that we need to make a blessing and various things, when we need to. So now we're going to discuss if someone made a mistake. So Chapter 50, number 10. Siman Nun, Sif Yud. Shachach, he forgot to make a bracha. And you put the food in his mouth without first making a bracha. So now we're going to see what it is. If it's something that even if you spit it out, you take it out of your mouth, it won't become disgusting. Certain things, once you put in your mouth, can't come out. But let's say it's a harder food and you didn't chew on it, then you take it out and spit it into your mouth, and you make the bracha on it. Why do we want to do this in the ideal situation? We shouldn't make the bracha while it's still in our mouth. Why? Mishum, because it's written in, it says Pasuk in Tehillim, Yamale fi tilasecha. Your mouth is filled with your praises. So when we say a bracha, we praise Hashem, we shouldn't really have anything else in our mouth. So yesterday, someone asked, not in relation to this, but in general about certain medicinal things that you suck on because of dry mouth and various things. So in the ideal world, you wouldn't have that either while you daven and different things. But if there's no other way to daven, and the mouth's not going to last the davening, get too dry, so then you could. But here we're discussing the ideal world. And as we all know, unfortunately, we don't live in the ideal world. But in all things being equal, which they never are, we should have an empty mouth when we praise Hashem. So our mouth is full of the praise with Hashem and not with anything else. So that's just something we can take out of our mouth. So we forgot to make a bracha, we put it in our mouth, and something that we can take out without it becoming repulsive from being taken out of our mouth, then you do so. But if it's something that if you spit it out, it's going to become repulsive, right? A half-chewed piece of meat, let's just say, or whatever. So it's given the asl abid oichlin, since it's forbidden to destroy food. There's a prohibition about tashkas. We can't destroy things that are of a purpose. What should you do then? You push it all to just one side of your mouth. So at least we got 85% of your mouth empty or whatever. And then you make the bracha. Now, all of this is if we're discussing a solid food. If the same thing happened with a drink, now you can't really put drink on the one side of your mouth and speak and say a bracha. It's not going to work too well. So in that circumstance, since there's not much you can do about it, if you have more drink, you should spit out what's in your mouth now, and then make a new bracha and drink the new or the further drink. If you don't have any more, and it's a little bit, and you can push it to the mouth. Well, it's different. Sorry, it's difficult to, and you can't, you can't keep the small amount to remain in your mouth because you need it. Boiling, you swallow it, and then you make the bracha afterwards. Even though the bracha is meant to be first, you make it afterwards. Right, because since he remembered to make this bracha while it was still in his mouth, it's almost like, it's somewhat similar to making the bracha first. But you don't make it after blessing. Ach imhu yain v'shos revius, unless it was wine, and you drank a revius, 85 or 86 mils, 3.5 fluid ounce. I think it's just over 3 fluid ounces. Then you'll also make the after blessing. Okay, for those who joined us during that Sefer chapter 50, number 11. Chapter 50, number 11. All right. Next halacha. You have two foods, two things you're going to eat in front of you, and they have the same bracha. Good going. It's going to give an example. Egois v'tepuach, a walnut and an apple. So they're both the bracha breipri eitz. They're both there. So what do you do? Shach levarach al echad v'liftoi gam hasheni. If you're in a situation like this where you can make the bracha on one, thereby fulfilling the bracha on the other. So you have in mind, so you make the bracha on one, you have in mind both, plan to eat both. Chayiv la'aseh kain. That's what you should do. V'aseh loy levarach al echad b'kavan shaliftas hasheni levarach gam alav b'fnei atzmai. Person, it's forbidden for a person to make a bracha on one of them with the intention, thinking to themselves, I'm specifically only making the bracha on this one. I do not want the bracha to go on the other one, which would then force him to make another bracha on the other one if he wants to eat it as well. You're not allowed to do that. Why can't you do that? Because it's forbidden to create a situation where an unneeded bracha is made. Right? Because we don't want to say Hashem's name unnecessarily. So if we're going to force a situation to require bracha that we wouldn't have to say otherwise, this is saying Hashem's name needlessly. Okay, so we've got two foods. What we should do is, and they have the same bracha, we should have in mind as we make the bracha on one, that the bracha is also going on the other one. So which one do we make the bracha on? We got the walnut and apple. Which one gets the bracha? Which one do we actually hold and make the bracha on? So
the one that you like the best.
Yes, that's going to be pretty much the answer. Now we make the bracha on the one that is more important, which, as we said in the previous chapter, sorry, we're going to say later. You're going to give definitions. So the one you like the best, or if you want them both, they're both nice to you. One's from the 7 species. So we're gonna get to there. We're gonna go into detail. So whichever one is the more significant, and there's various factors makes one more significant, and we'll get to that in chapter 55, God willing. And on the making the bracha the more significant one, the nifta sheni will fill the obligation the second one as well. Even if you didn't specifically have in mind. So there's 3 possibilities. Possibility number 1 is when you take the food number 1, you have in mind you're saying the bracha on food number 1 and food number 2. That's the ideal world. That's the first instance, and that works. Possibility number 2, which works after the fact, is I took food number 1 and I made the bracha. I wasn't thinking about food number 2, but it is in front of me, and I was planning to eat it. I just wasn't thinking about the bracha going on it. I didn't think that it shouldn't, but I didn't think that it should. I just wasn't thinking about it when I made the bracha. So that works. The bracha goes on the other one because it's there in front of you. Then the possibility number 3, which we mentioned before, which you're forbidden to do, is to take food number 1 and say the bracha with the intention that it's specifically only going on number 1 and will not go on number 2. That we can't do. So when you make the bracha on the more important food, it automatically goes on the other one if you didn't intend. But if you made bracha on the food that is not the more important one. Then it cannot, the bracha does not go on the second one unless you specifically had it in mind. When you take the more important one, then it automatically includes the other one. If you take the least important, then you have to actually have in mind both. So if the person just made a bracha on the least important one first, not having in mind, now he has to make a new bracha on the other one. Because the less significant doesn't really drag the other one along, doesn't automatically take care of the more significant. So that's if the foods have the same bracha. Number 12, what's going to happen if you have various things you want to eat and there's different brachas? So there's two types of food and they have a different bracha. We'll give an example. Retiree 8, so Retiree Dama, you got something that you make a fruit of the tree, something fruit of the ground, or Davish Brachasa Shahakol, or you have something the bracha is Shahakol. Afagabi the Eved, even if it's after fact Shahakol, like rice or not so. So sorry, even though after the fact, in Baruch al Kulam Shahakol, if you made the bracha on everything Shahakol, it works. Or after the fact, if you made fruit of the ground on something that's fruit of the tree, after the fact it works because the tree grows in the ground. Yotze, you would have filled your obligation. Because Makim, nevertheless, the Tchila Asal La'asas came. In the first instance, you're not allowed to do that. Ella, rather, what do you have to do? Each food should have its most descriptive and designated bracha. So we need to do things in an order. Because if we do it in the wrong order, if we say a more general one first, we will, after the fact, take care of everything, right? So if you had a Retiree 8 and a Retiree Adama and a Shahakal, since Shahakal means Hashem creates everything, therefore it's the most inclusive, and if you said Shahakal first, intending to eat all these other foods, and then what would happen is it would, after the fact, fulfill the obligation, and that would deprive you of the ability to be able to make the most specific designated bracha. So what do we do? In the case where we mentioned to go to Retiree 8, Retiree Dama Shahakol, Birchas Retiree 8 Kademis. The Retiree 8, creating the fruit of the tree, comes first. Now, this is even if you have wine and grapes. And he wishes to drink the wine before eating grapes. And he makes a Retiree Gofen first because he's, it's hors d'oeuvres, it's the buffet for the meal. So he's having a few drinks and there's grapes there. Even though if he would intend lift up bracha gama novim that this Retiree Gofen should also fulfill the grapes, he can exempt them with the blessing, technically, because grapes are also fruit of the vine. So even though that would work in theory, nevertheless, you're not allowed to do that in the first instance. As we said, you have to make the most specific designated bracha as possible. So what should the person do? He's going to have a few cups of wine. He's going to eat the grapes afterwards. But the grapes are there when he's making the bracha. So the kamen shall lift and love him. So when he makes a Retiree Gofen, he should specifically have in mind that he is not fulfilling his obligation of the bracha on the grapes. Kedai, in order the varech gamaleim bracha musukenes, he can make the appropriate bracha on the grapes afterwards. Shehi, which is boirei prihates. Okay. So number 13. B'chol advarim, with all things, we're talking about foods, but so all foods, chutz min hapas, except for bread, that we explained in chapter 42. We had its own rules because it was a set meal. So other food. Im shina mikoimoi, if a person changed location in the middle of eating, even though you did not take your mind off the eating. In other words, you didn't say, "Oh, I'm finished eating now." You didn't. You're still eating in your mind. But since you changed location, and we'll define soon what change location means. It doesn't mean you went to the chair next to you. We're going to talk about what change location means. But Robert, yeah.
On the previous halacha, what if it's the opposite way? In this one here, he's saying he wants to have the what is it? He say he has in mind not to have in mind the grape. He doesn't include the grapes. But what if at the beginning he wants to have the grapes first before the
Then he
wine?
then he makes Eights, and that's not going to affect the wine because
Okay,
the bracha on wine is not Eights.
okay.
Okay. Um. Right. So if he changes location, even though he didn't take his mind off eating, in other words, in his mind he's still eating. It's as if he decided to stop eating. It makes a break in the eating. And therefore, someone who's eating or drinking in one room, and he goes to a different room. And we're going to define this again in a minute. To complete the eating and drinking. Even though he's eating the same food. Or he's holding it in his hand. He was eating an apple. But nice in the he goes to another room. He has to make another bracha. Let's pause here for a moment. So I just want to clarify. So if when he began eating, he intended to go to another room in the same house, or even from one floor to another floor in the same house, that's not a problem. The issue is over here. Also, if a person, when he made the bracha, he's intending he'll wander around the house, so it's not a problem. What we have though is if someone is sitting down at the table, for example, and you're intending, I'm eating here in the dining room or the kitchen, whatever, and his intention was to eat the meal there. Then, for whatever reason, they go to a different room to go sit on the couch. So, as it was totally unexpected, that's going to make it that can be problematic. But in the same house, if a person intends, well, they have in mind they're going to eat whatever in the house. That's not a problem. There is an opinion if you make the bracha outside that since you're under the sky, that's your roof. So anywhere outside helps. All right. So if a person's gonna, let's say you start eating, you're gonna get in the car and you're gonna go to the store and you're gonna whatever you do. So you can make a bracha before you get in the car. As you're driving is not a problem. So that's if a person was intending to eat in one spot and they change location. But even though you have to make a new first bracha when you go to a different place, new room, you don't have to make the after bracha first, then go. Because what's going to happen is a bracha you're going to make at the very end of the eating, after you made a new first bracha and eat some more. That will work for both. Now, that's if you change location to from where you were eating. Number 14 is going to be you went outside. Again, not talking about bread. You're eating, I don't know, soup, and you went outside, and then you returned ligma chilosoi to continue eating. So under certain circumstances, you're going to have to make a new bracha to continue eating. I mean, literal translation what I just read is you do need to, but straight away I'm going to say, when does this apply? In other words, when do you need to make a new bracha? This is if you're eating by yourself. That's one thing. So in other words, if you're eating with a group and you left and came back, the fact that the group is still in this meal, that didn't end the meal. But if someone's on their own, under certain circumstances, leaving is going to end the meal even though they're coming back. Or another possibility, you were eating with other people and everyone changed location. But if even one of the group stays in the place, then even those who did leave, since they intended to come back, to rejoin this person who is still there, and to finish eating there. Therefore, when they return and eat and drink together with him or her, they do not need to make a new bracha. The kibun shnisha kan echad, because since one person remained behind, well, in this battle the their set eating did not get abandoned. The actual act of eating was not terminated. And when they return, they all return back. And it's all considered one meal. And so this is we're going to find it a bit further. 15. Now in the same room, literally from corner to corner, but in other words, you move around in the same room. Even though it's an incredibly large room, this is not called changing place. Now, this is even if you can't see the new place, right? It was a big room, but there was a piece of furniture and you can't see one of the corners from where you were sitting. And so even though you couldn't see the place, it still works. All in the one room. Okay. Next. Number 16. Im Eichel Payas began. A person was eating fruit. It doesn't have to be fruit, but the main thing we're saying is not bread. In a garden. So in other words, it's outdoors, but you're surrounded by walls. So it's not quite a house. It's not quite like being in a room, but it's one step off. Baruch Aperes Me'ilan Echod, and he made the bracha over the fruit of one tree. Al das Echol Gamalon Acheros. With intention, he's going to eat fruit from the other trees. So he was in this garden, surrounded by walls, and he picks a pear, and he makes a bracha, And he also had in mind he's going to pick an orange from the other tree. You can even eat from the other trees. Even though where he was standing when he made the first bracha, he couldn't see the other trees. As long as he didn't take his mind off eating. In other words, in his mind, he's still eating. He's having this snack or meal, whatever it is. He doesn't need another bracha. And he won't need to make a new bracha to eat more fruit. But if the garden is not surrounded by walls, because the walls make it all one thing, so it's open. And certainly, if you go, if you go from one garden to another garden, it doesn't help. It's like changing places. Right? So it's unless you could, if you could see the trees, though, it's not a problem. Okay. So that was chapter 50. Any questions before we move on? All right. Well, chapter 51. Now we're going to discuss bracha achroina, the after blessing. So after we finished eating, we need to, now again, we're not talking about bread that has its own, but we're going to discuss Siman Nun Aleph, chapter 51, Klolim Baracha Achroina, the general rules of an after blessing. And there's 15 chapters in here. Aleph, number 1. Al Peres Ilun, on fruit of trees. Chutz Mishivas Aminim, excluding the fruit of trees that are the 7 species that Israel is blessed. So excluding grapes, figs, dates, pomegranates, olives, excluding those. V'al kol peres adama v'rakos, and so all the other fruit of the trees, plus all the fruit of the ground and vegetables and greens. V'chal davar she'en gedulim min haaretz, together with everything that does not grow on the ground, like meat, dairy, eggs. Mavarach lachareihem, the blessing that we make after them is boirei nafoshes. Right? It's a blessing that thanks Hashem for creating the world. Mordechai, you have a question? No? Okay, sorry. Vafilul achal v'shasa nifta bracha achas. And even if a person, they ate and they drank, so they had solid food and drinks and different things, it only requires one after blessing. So that is for those foods. So majority of foods that we eat has brain nefashis afterwards. It's the shortest after blessing. Base number 2. Bracha achroina. Now this after blessing, v'chein birchas hamazon, likewise the benching, the grace after meals on bread. Ein b'rachim ela im kain yachal kashir. There's a minimum amount you need to eat in order to make this blessing. Now this is different from the before bracha. So let's just clarify again. We said in the previous chapter, we said last week, that before we eat, doesn't matter how little we're eating. This minutest amount, if we're going to swallow it, then we need to make a bracha before we eat it. So before we eat, there's no shear, there's no minimum. Anything we're eating, we make a bracha. But after blessing, there has to be a minimum amount eaten, because after blessing is thanking Hashem for a certain amount of being satiated. Okay, so this just joined us, chapter 51, in the middle of number 2.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what is the shear? How much do you have to eat in order to make an after blessing? The high this is kazayas. Kazayas literally means like an olive, the amount of an olive. It's approximately about a fluid ounce. About a fluid ounce. Avol Pachas mikashir, but if someone ate less than this, ein sarach bracha achrona. You don't need to make an after blessing. So, let's say someone's just tasting something. They're tasting the soup, right? They want to see if it's needs something, and they're enjoying the taste. So they take one little spoonful. So, as we said, before bracha doesn't matter. There's no minimum amount. So he makes a bracha. He has one spoon of soup, and that's all he's having now. So there's no after blessing. Now, va'ala mashkin. So that amount kazayis, which is approximately a fluid ounce, a drop above, that's solid food. But liquids, person drinks something. So now we're going to have a difference of opinion. Opinion number one. Yesh oimrim, those that say, you have to drink a revius. A revius is, I think, about 3.5 fluid ounces. It's 86 mils. So that's the amount. The yesh oimrim, and then there's others that say, there's another opinion, the gam mashkim im shasa kazayis chay brachroina. Yeah, even liquids, it has to be a kazayis. In other words, if it was a solid, how much would be a kazayis? And therefore, the seis midei sveikim, to avoid any doubt. Now, so if you had between, so revius is probably a drop more than a kazayis. So if you drank between a kazayis and a revius, if you want to go like both opinions, you're going to be a little bit in doubt. So to avoid this doubt, the person should make sure to drink less than a kazayis, or at least a revius. And this makes no difference if we're talking about yain saraf is like whiskey and things like that. So whiskey, you take a little shot cup. It's say, I mean, different shot classes. This is my l'chaim cup. No, not quite, but so it can have different size shot cups. So it puts in it. It's not just because it's stronger doesn't make it a different din. Although he's being we'll say strict like this, that a person shouldn't be put themselves in this doubt. Generally speaking, we rule that we go like the opinion it's revius. And we're not really concerned if someone drank between a kazayis and revius. Gimel, number 3. So what we said that there's a minimum amount, that's if you're eating I don't want to call it mush because it doesn't have to be mush. But what we're gonna say is different. Let's say a person ate one walnut.
A mixture.
Yeah. Well, no, but what I mean is if a person ate a walnut, that's the example we're going to give. So he ate the whole thing as is created by God. In other words, it's one full unit. So even though it's less than a kazayas, it's a complete unit. So it's going to have a slight different din. But let's say if he ate it was broken pieces of nuts, so it's not a complete unit, then it's for sure going to be he needs to eat a kazayas. So I'll give an example from Gemara that in the opposite, right? Because not only is kazai, because when we say the person has to eat a kazayas, that's when you make an after blessing, because that's considered a significant amount that's an act of eating. So it doesn't only apply to blessings. The same amount applies to someone ate something that they're not allowed to eat. So something's not kosher. A person's not allowed to eat anything, even the smallest amount. But for there to be a consequence for eating, that's to eat a significant amount. So let's say, for example, an ant. So if a person ate, God forbid, they ate one ant, took one whole ant. Let's keep it alive, because that makes it it's different opinion whether it has to be alive or not. So we'll keep it simple. He took one live ant and he swallowed it whole. So even though one ant is much smaller than a kazayas, much smaller than a fluid ounce, but since it's an entire creation, so bria, it's one full unit, so that would already obligate the person for the punishment, because if presumed they're warned and no witnesses and different things, because they ate an entire unit. But if they put ants in the blender and they mushed it to make ant dip, then they would have to eat an entire kazayas. Hope I didn't put anyone off their lunch using this example. All right. So, Gimel. Dava shul kibriyosai, something that's as it was created. It's a full unit of creation. Dahainu, for example, ego is a walnut, echad, one walnut, or shapri, or another fruit. Afilu kitnius achas, even one bean. So yesh omrim. Again, we're going to have a different opinion. There are those that say, Afa pisha ein boy kazayis, even though it's not a kazayis, it's not the fluid ounce, it's not the minimum measure. Become mokim kiven pri shalim, since it's an entire fruit, it's an entire entity. Never, so therefore, mavarchim la bracha chroini, you should still make an after blessing. But yesh cholkin, and there are those who say, no, a bria only applies to something that's living. An entire unit is something that's alive. You don't say, well, I ate one grain of wheat. That's an entire unit, even though it's very tiny, or one barley, you know. Therefore, the Tzeis Midei Sophic, to avoid any doubt, and therefore Pachas Migzais, person should make sure they don't eat less than a Gazais. But if the thing was broken into bits before eating, then its importance, its significance of being an entire entity has been lost. Let's say, for example, grape. Oh, okay, let's say walnuts. Back to the walnut. So often the walnuts, you eat them in halves. They're not connected anymore. So it's broken. So that's it. So we leave the entire doubt. The whole story's gone. So number 3, we're going to continue discussing this entire full, it's called a bria, this entire whole creation, this entire unit. So number 3, something that is a whole unit. Going, for example, ego is echod, one nut, but the whole nut, or shapri, or another fruit, a grape, philokitnius achas, or even one bean. So yesh omrim, there are those that say, right, this is what I mentioned before, to explain a little bit more. Alpha pisha ein boy kazayis, even though it is not a kazayis, it's not a fluid ounce. Because mokim kiven shu pri shalom, nevertheless, since it's a complete fruit, mavarchim achra brachroina, we still make an after blessing afterwards. B'yesh cholkin, and though those that disagree, therefore, that says midei sophic, to get yourself out of doubt, what do? Ein lechol palchas megazayis. You shouldn't eat less than a gazayis. So if you're going to have some grapes, eat a bunch of grapes. Don't eat one grape. Or if you only wanted one grape, cut it in half. So you never ate a whole entity. And then its significance is nullified. Pachas megazayis. And then everyone agrees you have to eat at least a gazayis, say a bracha. It's pretty much what we said in number 2 at the end, but just explained it a little bit more. David, yes.
This is more to a question for number 2, I guess. If a person has 3/4 of a kazayas and 3/4 of a revius, can they be combined together?
Generally, foods combined together, yeah, because it's one act of eating. So,
No, for a bracha achron, I'm saying.
yeah, so it's because it's one act of eating. Meaning, so let's say a person says, let's just use an example. They're gonna have some, I don't know, cheese and all right. So each one is slightly less than the shear, but together, they did an act of eating, as opposed to a person had a little sip of something before, and then a few minutes later decided to have a little something to eat. That is not going to combine. But if it's one act of eating, it all combines. One has the same after blessing. Okay, and number 4 is going to go into this little more detail. So, kol oichem start from the gazais. All food combines to the gazais. Now, so when you sit down, so he has I don't want to say cheese and crackers because that's a different after blessing. Let's say he has a few bits of broken nuts and and a potato chips and on the one of those they call the trail mix. The things. It's all different things. So he didn't eat a kazayas of any specific thing, but he ate well and truly kazayas between all of it. So that all counts. And they might have different brachas. He said I ate some of the cashew that was in it and had dom on the potato chip, and he said shahakal on whatever else was in there, something like that. Now, v'im alcohol chatzi kazayis. If he ate half a kazayis, and we say half, it doesn't have to be exactly a half. It means anything less than a full kazayis. So he ate a partial kazayis. Of something that has a brain of foshes. And then v'chatzi kazayis medava mevarchim la birchas mein sheva. Sholish, sorry, mein sholish. And he ate half a kazayis. Again, doesn't have to be half. It just means less than a whole kazayis of something that we make the longer, the abridged of the full benching. So on grapes or something like that. A fil kechatzi zayis pass, even half a kazayis of bread. So it's not enough to bench on. Mevarach achareim brain nefashis rabos. You can make brain nefashis on all of it. So let's say a person had some grape, not a kazayis, but a partial, and he had potato chips, and he didn't have a kazayis of each one, but between the two it adds a kazayis. Even though it's a different after blessing, we can say an after blessing on the combination, the least specific after blessing. So brain nefashis is the most general. V'nira li, and it appears to me, says Rabbi Gansfried, to a dim achal chatzi kazayis and peiros sharachim alechem al eitz. This is even if he ate a partial kazayis of fruit that you say Allah eitz. Katz kazayis min sharachim alachrav ala michya, and a partial kazayis of food that's ala michya. So he had a little bite of cake and a little bit of some pomegranate seeds. Like Chatzizai's pass, or even had a little bit of bread there. Now, the most general blessing between all the food is the bracham and shalish. That's the intermediate size after blessing. And even though he's going to say ala micha ala peiros, but he's only going to say one lot of Hashem's names, so it all combines. So he says, so that's if you only had them. So what I said is going to make the bracha and shalosh between. That's if you had that. But the hashda ain't come shum of bracha achronis shaloi brain nefashos. In a case, we're talking about the case there was no brain nefashos. Become makim, nevertheless, mavarach lachroin brain nefashos. He says you still say brain nefashos because we never had a shear on anything. Vim achol kachatzi zayis memin shavarchim lachrav al mitzvah kachatzi zayis pas mavarach achreim al mitzvah. But if you had half or partial kazayis of bread, partial kazayis of mazonis, together makes them a zayis, then you say al michya because that's more specific. So he says that drinking with food. So I'm sorry, I guess I said the wrong thing before. I slipped my mind. The drinking and eating do not combine to make a shear. All beverages combine with each other, all foods combine with each other, but food and beverages don't combine. So there's interesting Igros Moshe that if someone had a vegetable soup, like and he had less than a kazayas of vegetables and less than a vias of liquid, so a pretty small bowl of soup. But if that's what they had, then you're not making after blessing. The exception is if food is eaten together when the liquid aids the food. So for example, it's in a sauce or a salad dressing, or you took food and you dunked it into a dip, then it combines. Okay. All right. So we had two partial kazayas in one eating, like the trail mix, it all goes. Slightly different case, number 5. Hey. Alcohol kachatzi zayis, b'shah v'chazav al kachatzi zayis. What happened is a person ate some food. And then they stopped eating. There was a pause. And then they kept eating. And between the two lots of eating, they ate a kazayis. So then obviously it depends how long the pause is, right? So we're going to start defining it. If from the beginning of the first eating until the conclusion of the second eating, it was all within the time frame of kedei achilas pras. Okay, we're going to define this in a moment. But in other words, we're going to see it goes within the time that's considered eating. The mistarfim shtei achilas. Then the two eatings combine. So, what's considered kedei achilas pras? So again, we have different opinions. The times it'll take to eat a small loaf of bread. We're going to say, to be on the safe side, approximately 3 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes. So a person, they decided they're going to have some chips, and they went off, and they came back, and a minute later, they ate some more chips. So neither a lot of eating the chips was a kazayis, but between the two it was. And from the time you started eating the chips to the time you finished eating chips, between the two lots was 3 minutes. So then it combines. Now, even drinking, we're going to see in a minute, there's also this time. However, there are exceptions. We're going to mention 6. I won't get to it today. I just want to point out that if someone drinks, let's say you drink coffee, the normal way to drink coffee is you don't just take the cup and drink coffee. You sip it over a period of time. So the reason that we say Kedei Chilas Pras is what combines it, because that's how people normally eat. You sit down and you eat. And when you're finished eating, you stop. People don't normally take one chip and then 5 minutes later another chip, then 5 minutes later another chip, and then 5 minutes later. That's not how you eat. I mean, it might happen once in a while, but that's not considered active eating. The norm for most foods is you sit down, you have what you want, and then when you finish, you're done. And normally drinking's like that as well. Someone has a glass of water, they drink the glass of water. Okay, you might take a sip or two, but you don't have a sip. But then there's certain things like coffee, for an example. Coffee, you might take a small sip, and then it's a minute later, another sip, and 30 seconds later, another sip. So you're certainly not going to drink a revius within Kedei Chilas Pras. Well, you might, but
At the beginning.
yeah, I mean, some people do. It could happen. Some people let their tea brew for a while and also cools down, and they whatever. But generally speaking, it's over a longer period of time. So the definition is going to be what's considered a normal act of eating for this food. So most foods, that's how it works. So if it's in this Kedei Chilas Pras, let's say between 3 and 4 minutes, the Mistarfim Shtei Chilas, these two acts of eating join together, and you make an after blessing. But if you pause for longer than that, Ein Mistarfim, it doesn't combine. Drinking. Now again, not coffee. We're going to discuss in a moment those type of drinks. Regular, a filo shah pachas mizeh, even if you pause less than this, and mistarfim doesn't combine. Because normally people have a glass of water. You don't drink a glass of water over 3 minutes. Okay, we're not talking about when you're eating and you're having a sip to aid your eating. We're talking about a person now just pours himself a drink. It doesn't normally take you 3 minutes to drink a cup of water. That's what he rules. I just point out that we have other authorities who rule that actually it is the same amount of time for a drink for the revius. And I think that's how most people rule. Okay, and it took less time than we thought, so we do have time to discuss coffee. 6, shasa mashke chama ma'at ma'at. Person drinks a hot drink, literally in small little bit by bit. We'll call it sips. Tomoi, te, kafe, right? That's Yiddish for tea and coffee. So there you go. So very difficult Yiddish words for English speakers. Given she'ena sheispam achas kashir, since he doesn't drink it, he's not, even though he's not drinking in the shear. Afalpi, nevertheless, this is the way it's drunk. It's drunk. Okay, he's saying the kol mokim aim the starfin doesn't combine, and mavarach machroim we don't. But we have in the Mishnah Berurah, he has a whole discussion. This is a whole dispute between authorities, and again the Shulchan Aruch Rav, the Alter Rebbe. So we would drink. The Mishnah Berurah's advice is you let it cool down so you can drink it all in time. But I don't know. That's a waste of a good coffee, I think. So there's that's right. But generally speaking, the way most poskim rule today is that that's it's not a problem. I once saw an interesting thing, about a thick shake. If we go like the strict opinion for a drink, is that considered a solid or a liquid? So it all depends on how thick is the thick shake.
To be
Right.
made right, you have to actually stop and ask yourself that question. Then you know it was made perfectly.
Oh, when it's not blatantly obvious, you're saying. Sometimes you have milkshakes got a little bit of ice cream in it. Sometimes you have an ice cream that's got a little bit of milk in it. But as has been pointed out, when you're not quite sure, that's a thick shake. All right, we won't start the next chapter, but any questions before we finish up? Oh, okay, well, in that case, we will wish everyone a wonderful week. And we'll see everyone next week, God willing.
Thank you very
Take
much.
care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Go too. Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, bye.
Good afternoon, everybody. Bye.
Bye.